have the Rob Report, where we hear directly from our founder and lead advisor, Rob Ferguson. Rob, I'd like to just throw the topic out there and you take the wheel and run with it.
Okay, there's good lessons that you want to learn from a non-family board, and then I would say that there's some lessons you don't want to apply in a family business. I look at it in those two perspectives. We help family businesses put structure in place, tighten up their governance systems. Part of that is maybe putting in a board of directors or an advisory board. In a non-family business environment, whether it's like Jay described, it's a public company but controlled by a private entity, they have boards. I mean, there are fiduciary boards. I've been on a public board. And some of the goodness that comes from those non-family boards, number one, is board independence. I think having that board independence, you have qualified independent directors on that board that are able to bring objectivity to the strategic issues at hand. Having that board independence also helps minimize family conflicts because you've got some sage mentors on the board. So I'd say the first valuable lesson for why would I want to have a board of directors in my family business would be to bring in some objectivity, bring in some better controls with some independent directors there. I guess the lesson is you get clear separation of roles between a board of directors and the executive team. In a family business, the shareholders, well, in any business it works this way, but it's very critically important in family business, shareholders hire the board of directors. And the board of directors hire and oversee the CEO. And then the CEO obviously hires their executive management team. By really defining it, sometimes the CEO is the founder, is the CEO, and is the primary shareholder. Well, you can see there's no separation of duties there. And that can work very well at the early life cycle of a business. But as that business grows and expands, and over time, the business is going to outgrow the competency or the capacity of that family member who's the CEO and the board member and chairman of the board. So that's where the clear roles of separation really come in. It helps manage that overlap between family ownership and management. I would say the thing that I like the most is there's some formal governance structure in place. When I was on a public board CEO, I had to give a quarterly update to Wall Street. And so the entire team that would prepare me for that update. So we had systems and processes to make that happen. The CFO had to make sure the books got closed on time, et cetera, et cetera. And a family business, bringing some of those same disciplines and that same structure really helps. Even though in a family business, you're not reporting to some governing entity or some public entity, but it does help your management team know their business a little bit better as they help that CEO get ready for their board meeting. It really just provides some additional, I'll call it professionalization around decision making. And then lastly, this is very important, is having a board of directors in a family business makes the family members become more strategic. In a non-family business board, that's all they really work on is strategy. And they're making decisions on important business matters. What I've noticed when there is a pseudo-functioning board of directors in a family business, they're very tactical. They're very operational oriented. They'd like to get into the weeds of things. And by shifting that mindset from the tactics to the strategy of the business can be very, very helpful for that family business. So those are the main points that I think are important. Now, some things that I don't like about non-family boards. They tend to be very short-term minded. I mentioned to you, I had to manage quarter to quarter. So we're always looking at, okay, how are we going to impact the value of the business in the next 3 months? And so very, very short-term focus. And a family business has a much longer term focus. Families are focusing more on next generation. How do I protect the legacy? How do I build the value for the next generation? So I think is kind of the secret sauce of a family business. I would say the other thing too is how they make investments. Non-family boards tend to make investments that will give them a short-term gain, and they're also risk adverse if it's not going to add value immediately in the next 6 months to 12 months. Whereas a family business, They're in it for the long haul, and they'll make investments that, yeah, maybe I'm not going to get a return in the first year. I may not even get a return for 20 years. But by me investing in this property at this time, the next generation will be able to put a warehouse or a factory on that property, which would be ideal. So there, again, short-term focus versus long-term focus. The other thing, too, is family boards tend to be more relationship driven versus in a non-family board, it's a lot like coaching price. If you're not winning a national championship every year, you're going to get fired, right? You're out. Whereas in a family business, it's more relational, just saying, well, look, this was a tough year. That doesn't mean we're going to fire the CEO immediately. We're going to work with the CEO and resource that CEO and resource that management team. And yeah, we'll make some corrective actions where we might be deficient, but we're not going to be so quick to push the CEO out. Sometimes that's a negative too. Sometimes families tend to, and Brandy knows this, she's worked with some of these clients of ours, they hold on to the CEO too long, that because they haven't performed, but they're so relational driven, they just can't do it. They can't make that decision. It's too emotional for them. So that's
We're all
kind of
family here.
That's right. That's where it gets in trouble. So anyways, those would be some of my kind of key takeaways or lessons between a non-family and a family board of directors.
Is there a certain time period on the business life cycle where you should form a board? Or is it more of pain points or signals instead of the timeline?
Yeah, great question. I think you should have a board from the day one, but it's not a fiduciary board. It's an advisory board. And if there's any entrepreneurs that have started up a company listening to this, they probably had a very informal board. They had somebody that they were seeking advice from, whether it was their accountant or their attorney, or maybe it was somebody that they knew in the business world that had subject matter expertise that they didn't have. So I would say as soon as you can, you should have an advisory board. And it's probably very, very informal in the formative years. But as that business scales and as it grows, then it probably needs to formalize its advisory board. And what I mean by that is treat that advisory board like a fiduciary board, be able to add more structure and more discipline, and to be able to help start beginning to separate the duties between family and board. And what we usually see is when a company is starting to get close to 100 million in annual revenue, and or there's multiple generations now in the family business, either they're operators or shareholders, that's probably a good time to put in a fiduciary board. And by doing that, that fiduciary board can really help oversee and manage the whole succession process, not just of the CEO, but of the other executives as well, to keep that business moving from one generation to the next.
Any quick tips or pointers on how to formalize your advisory board?
Yeah, make sure you get the right people. And you want people on your advisory board that know something you don't know. Too many times I see advisory boards, it's their accountant, it's their attorney, and it's their barber, or their golfing buddy. And it becomes a social club. I don't recommend having your accountant or your lawyer on your advisory board. They're going to always be advisors for you. You want to add to it. You want to bring in expertise that you don't have that can actually give you advice. You don't want to bring in people that don't have any knowledge that will be accretive to your knowledge.